growing is what people could refer to as neural self-hacking. And then other people call it enlightenment engineering, and other people call it cognitive behavioral performance, blah, blah, whatever. But I think it is absolutely riveting what's happening in terms of sort of the reprogramming of the mind, because we know more about neurology in the mind than we ever have, and which is to say we know almost nothing still. But we do know that there are some functional techniques that can be applied to thinking in order to elevate all kinds of things. Because it's interesting, in Silicon Valley, of course, they're embracing some of the ancient practices like meditation and yoga in order to improve performance, which is funny because those are not necessarily about improving performance or productivity. So they're like usurping them for that purpose, which is fine. Do whatever you want with them. But I think that is phenomenal what we're going to see coming up in terms of people amplifying not only their productivity, which I think is sort of the most superficial application, but their awareness of their own perception and their ability to be empathic toward others in a way that matters in the workplace and in their lives. And I think that's amazing. Like, that's a big change, because normally it's kind of like we blame others like that. They did something, it's their fault. I know the truth. Like, we don't have any awareness of how we perceive things and how we tell stories to reinforce our own beliefs, and I think that's going to blow wide open in the next few decades. There's some work, like, for example, if you're at work and you have a consistent clash with the same person over and over, right? Most of the time people are like, well, it's, they make up an arsenal of reasons why it's the other person's fault, and that's a pretty common one because work politics can get difficult. And so there's technologies where because neural self-hacking, by the way, can also be applied to technology like plugged into your stuff. I'm not referring to that. I'm doing the low-tech version. But so say you have an interaction with the same person all the time and it's negative, and the traditional response is that person's wrong. So there's basic technologies where you can ask yourself, what's actually happening? Not what do I perceive to be happening, but what's actually happening? What would be some of the reasons why that continues to happen? How am I personally responsible for that? How might I shift my behavior in order to change an outcome? That's like really, 4 questions you can ask yourself. But and they're not easy. I'm not saying that it's easy because it requires practice and a commitment to it, but it can change a transaction forever if you choose to try to understand what you're bringing to it in terms of storytelling. The disruptive change I'm currently struggling with in my organization and sort of philosophically is the idea that now in the creative economy, people are not segregated, like their personal self and their work self can be fused. And I welcome that change because I've never been one to applaud the weird bipolar thing about like go to work and be this person and go home and be that. So I welcome it, but it makes it hard as a leader because I want to create other leaders in my organization, and I'm trying to balance like empathy with the wholeness and fullness of the person, coupled with the need to be decisive and pragmatic and fearless. So if one of my contractors calls and they're like, oh, this is happening, my natural instinct is to be empathic and to become a friend, and also to acknowledge that they have a whole life, and of course it will influence their work and their performance because that makes sense to me. But I also just am just like, well, suck it up, punk, and so it's like, how do you acknowledge, the reality, which is that people are whole, and I'm still struggling to set up an organizational culture that balances leadership and decisiveness with appropriate levels of empathy and all that stuff. That's real hard.